Hello everyone, it's your host, Seth, and with me today I have my good pal Clyde. Now this will be a donation video, so we have a few sponsors, few donors that want to make certain videos on this side channel. Today's video will be Kenpachi versus the 5 Kage, maybe some of the Shinobi Alliance. Kind of get into some of the Kenpachi versus mid-tiers of Naruto kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting to think about stuff like that because obviously in the original Naruto Shippuden series we see Madara versus the 5 Kage. We see Madara versus the Shinobi Alliance, how he would handle it, how he interacts with the characters. And while this video isn't necessarily a comparison of Kenpachi versus Madara, it's more so going to be a comparison of Kenpachi versus the particular people that Madara and Obito and all of these other Edo, Jinchuriki, and Kage have to battle during the war. We might get into some KCM Naruto stuff a bit later, but for now, it's mainly going to be the 5 Kage. This is the main matchup that people tend to compare certain teams to or certain solo entities to. It was actually one of the original ideas for Sukuna as well when we were all scaling Sukuna or Gojo or some other verses as well. Some people like the 5 Kage matchup who can take out the 5 Kage. Even within Naruto itself, they like to know who could take out the 5 Kage, whether it's Itachi or whoever else. So it is pretty interesting to kind of think about. Kenpachi also has some meteor-like qualities. Maybe a more thematically fitting matchup might be Gremy versus the 5 Kage, because Gremy can just throw a meteor just like Madara can at them. But maybe we'll go over that a little bit as well. We might go over it just by default. But that being said, I guess, what are some just off-the-dome thoughts you have about the matchup right away? Because this isn't going to be like a main channel video. We don't have to go for like 2 hours like Aizen or anything. But, you know, what are just some off-the-dome thoughts you have right away?
Yeah, well, I guess the matchup's pretty streamlined because Kenpachi is just a very physical, combat-heavy fighter. He just moves around the battlefield, swings really hard, big tank character. It's not too complicated, but this is predominantly for the fact that it was donated for, so Kenpachi has a lot of things going for him throughout the entirety of Bleach. He is actually nerfed with like multiple different layers of nerfs. From his own mental, actual like inability to fight all out, to the eye patch, to the fact that he hasn't throughout the whole series until the war arc accessed any of his true power from the past. And a bit of a misconception is that he doesn't attain Shikai and Bankai from the past. It's actually something that's awakened through that training with Unohana. So he leaves the Muken after training with her at a stage that's even higher than his quote-unquote prime. And that's what really makes it so much more impressive too, is when he's battling the Star Knights later into the deeper parts of the war arc of Bleach, you start to see what he can really do. And as Seth was saying, like a thematical sort of comparison is that, well, what was the big thing in Naruto during the war arc that happened when Madara appeared? Oh, he dropped 2 meteors down, that was really cool. Well, in Bleach, around a similar time period when the chapters were coming out, a Quincy called Gremy actually did the same thing. Kenpachi in this instance is essentially just like a replacement for that battle, as what Seth was saying earlier. So I guess to run through some things, because he's not really that complicated compared to how Aizen is. Like for me to say hypothetically scale Kenpachi, I would have to do a very top to bottom like breakdown of like how strong he was in the Soul Society, how things evolved over the course of the series. So while he is nerfed quite heavily throughout the majority of early Bleach up until the war arc, and then his narrative is to replace Yamamoto as their kind of nuclear bomb versus the other combatants on the other side of the war, the fact of the matter is he has some kind of goofy stuff that we can start off with to sort of explain how he could be susceptible to some of these Kage or Shinobi Alliance type characters before we get into our higher interpretations of Kenpachi. So I guess I'll let you take it from here, Seth. What would you say in regards to that if you had to give them a genuine, really solid win con before we start really getting into that later Bleach scaling?
Well, the first thing to know is that, I guess, the meteor that the Shinobi Alliance stop, it has pretty good calcs. Anywhere from island level to continental, depending on where Madara yanked that meteor out of the stratosphere or the asteroid belt. At whatever speed, he could have yanked it out of there at light speed, could have yanked it out of there MFTL. Some calcs have it 500 times FTL. Some calcs have it just hypersonic. He just made it in the immediate stratosphere, threw it down. Different calcs about that. So the 5 Kage then have the jutsu and the capability to somewhat nerf its attack potency. Even just generically speaking, you have some very low-end statements for the 5 Kage. Like Jiraiya can cut down a mountain with his Rasengan. he's compared to Tsunade. Now, Sage Jiraiya isn't necessarily compared directly to Tsunade, but Sage Mode is only so much stronger than full 100 healing Tsunade if they were already rivals. Same thing with the Raikage as well. Raikage is somewhat of a rival for Tsunade. We see that in the filler. We see that directly in combat. The Raikage is stronger than Killer Bee, probably in his full transform state, until the War Arc where Killer Bee grows stronger. And this is pretty confirmed in multiple material. We see like all of the time that the Raikage can compete with the Eight Tails. And then we just see that the Raikage, the fourth Raikage, just outdoes Killer Bee, stated to be the strongest Shinobi. Karin says, wow, he's as strong as a tailed beast. These tailed beasts can just vaporize mountains. They can add to a portion of power that can help the Nine Tails blow up a giant portion of, you can see like this explosion where there's the curvature of the earth on it. Even these mid-tiers, they have some map transforming qualities, and maybe a Naruto fan might immediately point out like, man, even Aizen was pants when a mountain blew up. He's like, damn, I'm tough, Ichigo. And then Ichigo had to come in like, no, Aizen, I blew up the mountain. I'm the tough one. And Aizen's like, I can't believe it. You know, he's the one that did it. You know, so it's like there's some goofy writing, but with Kenpachi in particular, it gets a lot worse because Gremy comes out. He's throwing rocks at Kenpachi like he's an Avatar, the Last Airbender, like he's an Earthbender. He's throwing tiles at him. At one point, he traps Kenpachi like in a water bubble, and in the manga, it's completely unimpressive. The anime made it look a little bit cooler, but it's like an attack that an 8-year-old could probably escape from, this ball of water. I think at one point he attacks him with guns. I don't know if he used lava at one point. There's a scene where Gremy creates this portal to outer space. We don't know if he just generated like this galactic pocket dimension or if he just made a portal to some point in space. It could be interpreted either way. And then he also throws a meteor at Kenpachi as well. So there's this varying scope of intensity going on where it's like, what's going on with Gremy? And this meteor that he's going to throw on Kenpachi, it's, in terms of just raw calcing, honestly, it's not the same scope as the Madara meteor. In terms of calcs, it's not the same. Unless you think that it's going to blow up the entire Soul Society or whatever. But I think a good takeaway here, because there's some immediate downplay, like Kenpachi's eyeballs are frying out of his head just being in outer space. He's handling outer space worse than Cars and JoJo's. Like, he's like a building level fighter, you know? Like, there's just way weaker characters that can handle outer space better than Kenpachi.
There's some weird lingo with the whole, like, oh, if you were as strong as steel, you should have told me and stuff. There's a bit of weird stuff going on with that lingo.
Yeah, I can cut stronger than steel, you know. It's very, very goofy. So, yeah, you know, it's pretty easy to say, you know, oh, wow, if 5 Kage would jump him. Pretty bad. Tsunade's going to punch him one time. Like, you telling me Madara Susanoo ain't harder than steel? Like, didn't Sasuke Susanoo crack a kunai on his back when it was, like, nerfed versus Danzo or something? You know, just basic brain-dead stuff. Give you that wrong impression. But the thing to take away, especially with scenes like with him getting caught in water or whatever, is that these scenes are what Gremy imagines would happen to you. So when Gremy imagines you in a ball of water and he's like, it's hard to swim around in water, well, Gremy's also kind of applying traits to the things he imagines. So he's applying a trait where he thinks it would be hard for Kenpachi to swim through water. He's not just making water. He's also adding an extra layer of fantasy to the water where he imagines Kenpachi struggling in the water. Same thing with outer space. He's like, being trapped in outer space, that burns, doesn't it? You know, like, that's gonna, like, can you really survive being in the void of space? That'll, like, suck you out, be a void. And then Kenpachi starts burning, probably just like Gremy imagines, right? Same thing with guns. He imagines guns are probably pretty tough. They can, like, blast you to death. He's imagining these war films or whatever he has. Realistically, obviously, even the most downplayed Kenpachi's not getting hurt by a bullet. I mean, come on, bro. So it's like, these are clearly Gremy guns that are amped, right? Same thing with the rocks and tiles he's throwing. And finally, the same thing can be applied to the meteor, where the meteor Gremy throws, it could just be, well, he's just imagining what would happen if he threw a meteor at him. That's like the ultimate move, the strongest physical force he can imagine, just throwing at Kenpachi and just destroying the massive area. He just imagines the strongest possible attack. It's almost like his weird own, I want to say, like, rock spirit bomb he could make, if that makes sense, but it also has more amplified qualities of his ability, like his imagination ability, where it's not just a meteor, it's also what he imagines it to be. And the manga does a better job, because the manga kind of presents it a little bit more fantasy compared to the anime version, but that's my initial retort to the downplay sections of that. So from there, I guess we can kind of get into some things you think about what you think Kenpachi would actually be, but yeah.
I have stuff to add here. So the reason that interpretation is, I think, a lot more true to the nature of Bleach is just because it's exactly like the mountain feat. We've been through this countless times in prior videos, but it's essentially like this. If you think the mountain is truly meant to be the peak of the power that's being stated here, and it's not actually, yo, I didn't realize we were just casually destroying them in combat like this, because that seems to be more the emphasis. Well, here's the problem. Earlier in the series, much weaker characters perform better finite, just flat feats than those things, whether it's the meteor or the mountain feat. Grimmjow straight up just has a better feat earlier in the series. The Sogoku was a straight up better feat earlier in the series. There's town level explosions in the Karakura Town conflict that are better than those feats if you were to just condense how much power is in one bomb destroying that area. Now, going back to the meteor specifically and how that, that correlation is kind of weird to downplay it to that, and same with his imagination powers. Well, in the 1,000-Year Blood War, there was actually a sort of discussion about what Gremy does with opening up space and throwing Kenpachi in there. Now, in the past, I was always a little bit skeptical of it, because I always thought, well, Kenpachi's just getting thrown into space, Gremy's just playing with him, he's using his imagination powers to just put him into different sort of environments and see what happens, right? But the thing is that, as Seth pointed out, his imagination powers also have an added layer of, well, imagine it's like this, right? He summons a gun, and instead of it being just a base AK, his AK can, for whatever reason, shoot through characters that have the durability of being planet level. Well, that's what's actually going on in the series. And the fact that Kubo and some of the directing staff of the anime decided to recontextualize the whole creating space element and showing that he's creating stars and Jupiter-sized things, galaxies, so on, all these different interpretations with the way it's drawn with the sketch. It's very clear that it's not meant to be yo, this meteor is only this big and it's this dangerous. It's no, the meteor he's imagining is, sure, visually it looks quite similar to the ones we've seen in other series, but it's doing something different. It's got more potency when it lands. And another argument that can be made is that the reason the characters below are so in shock is because, their whole living quarters is about to be annihilated in a couple seconds. So of course they're going to be shocked. They're where did that come from? Kenpachi then jumps into the air, and he destroys the meteor with no trouble whatsoever. So whenever the meteor is used as some sort of measurement of power in regards to Kenpachi, it's not actually a problem. He just one-shots it easily, and even makes statements about how he's excited to test out his new abilities on the meteor. He's man, I've never cut one of these before. Why? Because he's never been in space before. It's super, super simple, and that just adds further compliments to him in terms of just a flat sort of face value power, because it's alright, well, the meteor wasn't an issue, this was done with a single slash, this seems like something that's not the peak of his power even in Shikai. And then later on, he's got his Bankai, which puts him at an absolutely insane level that's so strong. Just from merely swinging while in this unperfected form, his arm blows itself open, which is pretty insane, but hopefully adding more of that context to my interpretation of things makes it a little bit more clear for the audience. I guess, what would you say going off of that then, further into the discussion?
My first takeaway then is to kind of scale some of the 5 Kage. Now, the 5 Kage, there are ups and downs to their scaling. Now, I'm going to say this to be charitable and fair to everyone, is that people are a little bit too charitable to Naruto and a little bit too uncharitable to Bleach. So they'll give every Lightspeed statement, every Lightspeed hyperbole or mention. They'll give it its utmost context, ignore every anti-statement, and they'll just contradict everything that Bleach stands for. So, as an example, we can see Ashvalen light come down from a clear FTL range. It shoots down from the Soul Palace to Earth. There's many calcs. I'm not going to go over the specifics verbally, but we can put some of the numbers on the screen. These are relativistic to light speed things, and then the novels are well, look, he's struggling with lightning. It's clearly there's something going on here. Oh, look at Ichigo's clothes getting fried by 5 gigajoules of lightning, but then here's, a much weaker Ichigo clearly just smacking around Ulquiorra, who's throwing these Lanzas that are nuking Hiroshima in the background, right? It's clear that this isn't 5 gigajoules of energy. So the problem is that Bleach is very funky with its ups and downs, but Naruto is a little bit as well. But one thing to say about Naruto is that it has a lot of Lightspeed statements, but the best one, for sure, in the data book is the Raikage statement. Now, with the other characters, you can kind of be a little bit fickle about it. Sure, maybe Haku's light speed, but no one reacts to Haku. Not even Kakashi in the War Arc actually reacts to Haku flinging himself in front of him at light speed while he's running with the Chidori, or the Lightning Blade. And this is full power War Arc Kakashi. Has no reason to hold back or restrict his power against an Edo Tensei Zabuza, and Haku blitzes him there, and in part 1, he blitzes him both times. So Haku, no good counter statement with his scaling. The other point, too, is, you have Darwee's Laser Circus, but the Laser Circus isn't just a laser. It's a laser traversing through the air on water particles. So he has to bend water particles with the light and as well, creating a storm style or like a storm type style. And then that's what creates the laser-like entity, or creates the laser. So it's not just a flat-out laser in theory. You could argue there are some water-bending elements to that and some time-related elements to that. Another thing, too, if a character has to travel with the lightspeed transportation, if they go over a long distance, well, their body starts to fry and freak out, and only the Raikage really can handle that. Tsunade, even with all her crazy durability, is getting fried. Whereas if she's a multi-continental being flung around at light speed, well, maybe she should be a little bit more durable in that regard. But there are some other weird things with the Raikage here, whereas in the data book it specifically says he travels almost at the speed of light, or like the speed of light, or around the speed of light. So it's not actually a hyperbolic statement either, whereas most things like, oh, he slashes at the speed of light, or blah, blah, blah. This could be hyperbolic language. We see that even with grease lightning, like a boxing term, like he has jabs as fast as lightning, It's very common in, like, with samurai or boxers or...
There was the famous Ali quote I mentioned in one of our recent collabs where it's like he claimed he could hit the bed faster than the light could be switched off. There's that sort of stuff that's used to, like, emphasize people's, like, ability and stuff in a flowery way.
Yeah, and so, with samurai, like Mifune and his slashes, it could be hyperbolic, it could be a little bit flowery, but the Raikage statement really just is, he moves at almost the speed of light, and it's not, maybe it could be slightly hyperbolic. It's not impossible for it to be hyperbolic, but it is very strange in particular language, like he moves like the speed of light or around it. Why wouldn't they just say the speed of light if they're being hyperbolic? Why would they say around it? So it seems like it's supposed to be a little bit more credible. Further on in the series, we then have Madara's Light Fang, which is a light speed attack, but it's a very casual, he just hawks a loogie at the speed of light at Naruto, and then Naruto dodges it. So you could say Naruto goes, whoa, and has to like kind of react heavily to dodge it, but even then, the Raikage speed's a bit downplayed in the series. The Raikage then can go to his version 2 form and sort of blitz around his light speed self. Now, blitzing, this gets into odd territory. Now, blitzing your perception or whatever, this gets into how your brain recognizes frames and so on. This gets into headcanon territory. But he gets to the ability where you can blitz around the form that can attack with this almost the speed of light lariat. Now, what level is needed for this almost the speed of light? We don't know. In the data book, it's shown to be the speed that I believe Six Tails Killer Bee uses. So maybe you can calc stack off of Killer Bee. Maybe you can get like a multi-FTL type thing. But the Raikage is then the fastest of the Hokages. Faster than Tsunade, faster than Inoki, way faster than Gaara, way faster than Mei. And then their light speed scaling, very, very dubious. You have to remember that Kakashi was a huge deal throughout the entire Shinobi world, cutting a lightning bolt, running at the speed of lightning. That was considered legendary, unbelievable. He then later on jumps in front of Kakuzu's false darkness lightning attack, and that's considered very impressive. The kids there really struggle to even react to something like that. We have no idea how fast that is exactly, but it just goes to show that the speed scaling in Naruto isn't so cut and dry. Maybe these guys aren't all like 300 times the speed of light, look on some One Piece calc stacking energy. It does seem to be a little bit more grounded, and the Raikage does seem to be exception. Even the Kirin Jutsu, some people argue certain translations of the data book says that's a light speed attack. And the Kirin Jutsu being a light speed attack is crazy because that's the strongest possible change in chakra nature Zetsu's ever seen in his life. Okay? And he underestimates it, thinks it's just the speed of lightning, by the way, and he thinks the speed of lightning is impossible to dodge, which is further proof of what I'm saying, that Kishimoto might not be on board with this 300 trillion times the speed of light, everyone in Naruto type thing. So yeah, saying the Raikage is like around the speed of light is usually accepted for the most part. And then the other characters, give or take, maybe they're relativistic, maybe, Raikage is a bit faster, but that's the high end. And then in terms of, power, they're rivaling some Bijou. The Bijou, They have calcs that could be anywhere from country level onward. Some people have them more around mountain level. Some people have them around island level. Some people will try to kind of bring them up using the war arc. It's a bit more continental level, but it's a little bit iffy. Even Killer Bee working alongside the Nine Tails for some bigger calcs. Well, Killer Bee and his Eight Tails trained. They're not normal tailed beast whatsoever. So they're a bit of an odd case as well. So that being said, it then gets into Kenpachi. And Kenpachi, does he have light speed stuff? Yeah, 100%. He outscales people that can dodge that Ashvalen dozens of times over. That's a calc stack, but that Ashvalen Mimi Hagi scaling, Bankai Kenpachi probably outscales that 100-fold. Now, maybe not in terms of, just the raw speed, maybe that's too much calc stacking, but he would blitz people that can react to the Ashvalen in close proximity, and the Ashvalen and the Mimi Hagi both are confirmably relativistic FTL, and this, you can get into other stuff like Nagashionn if you want, but...
There's a very simplistic scaling chain for the speed that you can use. I said this years ago in old videos, right? It works like this. So the Menos Grande has statements that refer to it being basically something that like a lieutenant captain sort of character needs to deal with, right? In the original like English viz, it says some really weird shit about some like royal guard type characters needing to come down. It's silly. But anyway, works like this. Super weak Ichigo, like pre-rope break on his Zanpakuto Ichigo. Reacts to the Zero coming down, blocks it at point blank range. So we've already got a character that at the very least is reacting to 10%, 30% of the speed, right? Menos Grande has a narrative scale to lieutenant characters. Lieutenants then dodge the Nagashionn. Those are two light speed things right now that are being shown to be consistent in battle. These characters like Ichigo get tens and tens and tens of times stronger. Flat based on what we know of the stories, just straight up wording with like Yoruichi's comments about Bankai, Ichigo mastering his abilities later on into the story, attaining forms that give him an increase of 100 times, being the full transformation into white against Ulquiorra, and then people would comfortably easily say that, Shikai Kenpachi being the anomaly that he is, the comparable character to Yamamoto in narrative, well, he's in that caliber, if not just straight up stronger in Shikai than full white, polification Ichigo that fights Ulquiorra. So, like, he, although he isn't known to be like a speedy kind of character, like you don't see him all the time using Flash Step all the time like Byakuya does or Yoruichi. He is a character, though, that has shown to be insanely intelligent and fast in combat because of things like when he was under Tosen's Bankai while completely blind and I also believe deaf, he baited him and blitzed him at point blank range when he got into the vicinity of his hand. Like, crazy stuff like that earlier in the series. Tosen scales deeply into the higher scaling of the characters in Karakura-tan conflict and arguably like baseline Stern Ritter level and so on if you were to put him and Gin into the war arc. Kenpachi exceeds them in power considerably. Tosen, weirdly too. At this stage, he's evil, but he makes all these insane comments about Kenpachi being like a monster and a demon and like really overpowered and like scary and stuff. And it's like, why is Tosen of all characters saying this? This isn't a part of the game to like fool everybody that he's low-key actually on Aizen's side, Like, this is just straight up him being like, this guy's f***ing insane. Like, and he's just saying that shit about early Kenpachi. And then added to what Seth's saying with the speed scaling. Although, again, Kenpachi is not seen to be like this flashy, really quick, Bankai Ichigo kind of character. He is actually really passively fast. Like, he competes with all these fast characters like an Unohana, ends up beating her. He competes with, Noyatora and just destroys him, Yami, etc. He's fought a lot of these kind of like tank type characters, but I mean, Unohana has like this sort of final message that she gives to Kenpachi as she's passing. She's like, now you can finally fight unrestricted. You have rivals that are in your league that you can compete with. You have new opponents you can fight, and the silhouette is Yuha. So if she's saying stuff like that too with her knowledge of Yuha, then that's really cool too. Not to say he scales above or to him, but the point is like she thinks in a combat scenario like he could compete, with that kind of character. Much later into the war, Toshiro and Byakuya make kind of notes of not really wanting to get too close to Bankai Kenpachi because he's going so ape in this like Ogi demon form that they're like, yeah, probably should stay out of the way of him. And what does that mean? It's because he might accidentally just kill them like while going ballistic. So there's a lot of stuff to say about him. The speed stuff in Bleach is super simplistic and easy to understand based upon what I said before. What Seth said is also really true too. I do feel like, and most, I would say, sensible people would agree that when you see a lot of the discourse about speed in Bleach versus other series, there's this really weird measurement of always wanting to downplay Bleach's interpretations, but always highball other series. We're not trying to use this as a way to just like wank Bleach as much as possible, but it's just clearly like the case that, you know, if it's said one way in one series, it's fine, but if it's said in Bleach, there's all this skepticism. Like, we're talking about these realm world-altering death gods who shoot lasers and fly, and them being FTL is like the contentious part of the series. That to me has always been silly as hell. Even one more thing to add to this earlier scaling with the Menos Grande stuff, really, really weak characters like lieutenants have to wear badges, which is called Gente Kaijo, so that they don't passively accidentally affect the entire world when they're there. And then there's that statement from Shinji where, although it's not a direct power statement, he does say to Ichigo, he's like, yo, chill out your spiritual pressure because it's echoing across the whole world. Like, you're going to alert, like, hollows and people we don't want to be interacting with right now. So, there you go. That's all that kind of wrapped up with a nice bow on top.
Yeah, and in terms of power, the Sokyoku Execution Halberd, Kenpachi outscales it heavily. That thing can erase everything in existence. It can destroy the Soul Society, potentially. That was actually the whole plot of a lot of the Soul Society drama. They thought Aizen or whoever was going to annihilate Soul Society with this halberd or harm it heavily. And then Kenpachi far, far surpasses Ichigo. Even if you believe in, like, the Ichigo is nerfed in the Arrancar arc or something until he fights Ulquiorra, Kenpachi far surpasses that unrestricted Bankai Ichigo that fights Byakuya. He fights and in fact, he's way stronger than a Byakuya that has to train very heavily to try to get a rematch with Ichigo. And that's why Byakuya can then fight Yami, because he goes through all this training. That was revealed later through some interviews and so on. But Kenpachi is then stronger than that one, who was rivaling that Ichigo, if not was just able to beat him. So then this is like to the point where Ichigo can come out with his hollow mask and still not be as strong as these guys. He would need many training amps and power amps as well from Grimmjow, Ulquiorra, and so on, to then even be out the point where he could harm Yami, or he would have to get through many mental resolves, mental barriers, and so on, and before he could reach his full power as Gin tries to weave out of him. And then it's Kenpachi's implied to be potentially fighting some Vassal Lord level characters in the novels and so on, even before Unohana gives him any trouble. And then Unohana amps him possibly however many times just to kill him over and over and over again, and every time he dies, he gets exponentially more powerful. He goes from Espada number 5 to Espada 0 in one KO session, basically. And Espada 5 to Espada 0 could be thousands of times in terms of an increase. These Espada almost always have like a 10 times increase in power from each other almost every single time, with some very few exceptions. Like, compare the difference in power between Ulquiorra and Grimmjow, it's absolutely insane. Second form aside, there's always this huge increase in power per Espada. And then this is Espada 0, stronger than any Espada, stronger than Ulquiorra, stronger than Stark, stronger than Noyatora, stronger than whoever in the data book. Kenpachi is just annihilating him after he transforms multiple times. He's the strongest Espada when he first appears in that giant form. He then does a second resurrection and Kenpachi slashes him down again. So we might have multiple tiers beyond the Sokyoku threatening the Soul Society. And then later on, he's supposed to be the next Yamamoto. He's supposed to be the next heavy hitter. Unohana's like, what's crazy about this? Unohana thinks that Yuha is a worthy opponent for him. But what's crazy about Unohana thinking that is that Unohana has seen Yuha fight before. She's actually familiar with how strong these Quincy and Yuha is. A lot of people don't remember that. And she's like, yeah, you have worthy opponents now. You have worthy rivals now. You don't need to be all depressed and sad. Well, that's an insane statement because these characters are potentially world-ending beings. Even if you think the Soul Society is a big planet, that's still crazy. Like, what do the 5 Kage ever do? It's going to be like when Ichigo tries to slash Kenpachi, they're just never going to harm him. He then has multiple transformations, at least 100 times power increase he can give. Shikai's a 5 to 10 times multiplier. We went over that in past videos because of Shinji versus Grimmjow. We see a direct comparison of the mask compared to Shikai. The mask itself is compared to a Bankai-like increase. And then there's a Bankai on top of that, and that's 5 through 10 times, in the words of Yoruichi. So there's like 100 times increase, potentially, that Kenpachi can give.
Tosin also says, too, he believes his mask is superior to Bankai. It could just be him being braggadocious because he's becoming anti-Soul Reaper at that stage with his narrative, but he adds further evidence to that, too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of evidence that the actual, and actually a good example too, is just Ichigo versus Grimmjow. The mask is compared to the first resurrection, and the resurrection is compared to a Bankai as another example. So there's a lot of proof for it. So Kenpachi might be able to just amp himself like 100-fold after he's already down Espada 0. Gets like a transcendent level amp over that. And they're just outscaling this Sokyoku, Soul Society destroying amalgamation, just unfathomable amount, whatever you think that means.
And I want to add to what you said too. So like, the fact of the matter is Orihime witnesses Ichigo versus Byakuya. She then witnesses him when he trains with the Visors and goes through a couple fights. So it's like, even early Kenpachi like has scaling that is comparable with these earlier feats too. Because Orihime states she thinks that Ichigo is stronger, like he's actually improved. So the idea that he's being significantly held back by the badge is actually more of an indicator that it's not the case. And it's Ginjo was telling him, he's like, yo, they're spying on you with this thing, be careful. That's what he kept telling him over and over, rather than like, bro, you're at like 1% your power. Like even early Kenpachi has those Ichigo type feats. And you establish that really well because he does go from 2 hands slashing number 5 to then fighting with Byakuya against 0. And it's like all those prior things we said, he just casually does that and then surpasses it in the tens of times over in the War Arc. Because over that time skip to the War Arc, he gets significantly stronger, fights Vasto Lord A tier entities like what you said from the novel statements and so on. Then he thinks he can brawl with the fake Yuha, loses. But then when he returns, Unohana's like, yeah, you could probably fight him now. And then Byakuya and Toshiro, who have also trained themselves and gotten even stronger, they're like, we should probably not get in his way. So he's just gotten genuinely, like, in a quantifiable manner, tends to possibly just a flat 100 times stronger than he was in the past.
Right. And then, of course, the transcendent Kenpachi, that's another argument, you could bring up here or there where people can't sense him when he first appears or whatever, but he does get significantly more powerful when he reappears versus Gremy. And it's to the point where he arguably can't be sensed conventionally, and then he gets his Bankai after that. So that's something else to consider. But that being said, even if it's to the point, and I'm wording it this way to be just as clear-cut as possible, even if the Soul Society is just a big planet, okay? It's not. But if it is, and all the Sokyoku is doing is gonna life wipe it, or destroy everything on its surface. Kenpachi is still outscaling the 5 Kage, by several just magnitudes, to the point where they just can't even damage him, even if he's just life-wiping the planet. And then he's outscaling that just dozens of times or whatever. So that's why it's not really a good matchup. In fact, even if the Soul Society is going to be destroyed by the Sokyoku and all these characters, which is heavily implied, Kenpachi definitely outscales Mimihagi. Unohana thinks that Kenpachi would probably be fighting a more powerful Yuha, and having to fight someone that took Bankai Yamamoto to fight. Who knows if Unohana was even talking about him evolving his Bankai out. She just thought he would just whip out his stronger sword or Shikai or whatever. She thought he would be able to take down this character that fought Bankai Yamamoto in the past. Even if it's getting to that degree, it would take a lot of Bleach downplay. Yep, this is only a planet. These characters, maybe they're planet level at peak. And then maybe, you need, KCM2 Naruto. You'd have to say he's, easily planet level. 144 times the speed of light or 72 times the speed of light based off his Raikage Blitz, which is heavily exaggerated, by the way. No one scales to a max speed Naruto because he only uses it in body flicker moments or, max speed moments. But even then, it's Kenpachi outscales that as well. There's just the star level statements in the novels. Even Luffy scales to a potential star-level Grimmjow in the novels. He's fighting Rangiku, bro. He's fighting Rangiku, let alone, transcendent Kenpachi. You know what I mean? So, these Bleach characters are annihilating the 5 Kage, bro. And honestly, the Shinobi Alliance ain't really touching them either. Maybe you can get to some crazy scaling with some Edo Kage or some hacks abilities, but conventional Shinobi are not touching Kenpachi, bro. I just don't agree with it.
The problem is, too, right, this is to sort of, visualize it for you guys. So, if they're really impressed by the perfect Susanoo, flicking out its sword and then cutting down a mountain, it's bro, there's just casual statements that are far more impressive made about Kenpachi. And the fact of the matter is, let's say you downplay the Soul Society Sokyoku statements to a city or to a planet. Well, the Sokyoku has a just straight-up data book statement that states it can overwhelm everything in existence. So it's it's either just... Because the Soul Society exists, right, on a planet parallel to the real world, but it's in its own universe, very clearly shown. Again, been through this kind of thing a million times, but the more preponderance of statements made towards Kenpachi and how he scales to these higher tiers, he's a 0 squad level character, so he's got all that scaling too. His mere existence could passively kill them, just from them trying to interact with him or try to slash him. Even if he was to genuinely put his hands together and do one big slash, he could annihilate the whole battlefield. He could destroy the whole planet they're on if he actually wanted to, really. So, yeah, they're kind of cooked. I don't think there's no little, like, tactical game plan where it's like, alright, you hit him with the Genjutsu, I'll throw a kunai. Like, they're just cooked. They just get wiped out. I guess to emphasize the whole point of this video in general is that it was one that we were donated to make, so I hope you guys enjoy what we've said thus far. Can you think of anything else that we should cover? Because it is really cut and dry. It's just like, imagine if you remove Genjutsu, Kenpachi in this situation is just a more intimidating Perfect Susanoo Madara that can do far more damage at this point.
And it's not that they don't use Genjutsu, like, it's not that they can't use Genjutsu, it's just that a lot of the Kage, the 5 Kage, don't actually use it on average. It's kind of like saying Sakura will use some Genjutsu in a battle. It's like, well, never really see that too much. So these Kage don't really use it too much in character. Like, is the 4th Raikage going to whip out a Genjutsu on Kenpachi? No, he's going to try to use his Lightning Cloak and punch him around a bunch. If that doesn't work, he's going to freak out. He's not going to try to whip out Feather Genjutsu on him or something like that. Same thing with Inoki. Same thing with Mei. Is Gaara going to whip out the Genjutsu? You know, Tsunade might whip out a Genjutsu, but even then, is that her go-to? Probably not. She's probably going to get cut down before that, realistically speaking. Kenpachi also, I guess in terms of character, he might hold back a little bit or try to play with them sometimes. That'd be plot-induced stupidity type defeat.
It does depend on which iteration too, doesn't it, though? Because he fights really different in the war compared to earlier, so even that would be debatable, right?
Yeah, it does. So you would say maybe he holds back, maybe Inoki's particle style would catch him by surprise and vaporize him. But I'm be honest, I think most attacks in Bleach are on the atomic tier anyway. I think they're a little bit more fundamental than atomic level. I think they're contending with people's souls. The swords themselves dictate where you're sent. Kenpachi's supposed to be scaling to Yama, you know, whether he's like current Bankai Yamamoto or like old Bankai Yamamoto level. Unohana seems to think he's going to be on the level of an older Yamamoto, maybe. And so these characters are then defying like the physics of the reality. Like Mimi Hagi's going to defy the physics of the reality. Ichibei only scales so much higher than Yamamoto, and Yuha, even he's mainly like a hacks oriented, but in terms of his raw power and authority, it's actually pretty limited in terms of the power scaling, like how far he gets, and him versus Yamamoto is debatable. You can even see like Pernida, which is like the other side of Mimi Hagi, trying to interact with other characters and getting resisted or like kind of memed on a little bit here or there. Kenpachi's no different. Kenpachi at full power, he's going to annihilate Pernida. He does actually get f***ed up by Pernida because he gets caught off guard at one point, but that's not full power Kenpachi, obviously. And so, yeah, these characters are deciding where your souls go, if they exist or don't exist. Yuha gave the Quincy's the ability to eradicate hollows from existence, specifically. So he has the authority to probably dictate that. He is a piece of the Soul King, which made all of the souls to begin with. So him having the ability to erase you from existence, if he wishes, is probably part of his arsenal. But I think that these characters often deal with that type of BS to begin with. I don't think like an atomic level attack is all it's going to take to just Dura neg Kenpachi and his spiritual Reiatsu. That probably can resist some attacks from Yuha. Let's be honest, if Bankai Kenpachi had to like fight one scrap of Ichibei's power, could he? Probably. You know, and that thing can erase you from existence. It can dictate your existence and your causality. So I don't think a particle style is going to erase Kenpachi like that. I think that's cope. But yeah, that's all I'll really say about that.
I got 2 more things to say. In the recollection of Yuha that Unohana has, she remembers him, if we go by the lore of, you know, the old Gotei 13 fighting him well, that would be knowing about more of a flexed, stronger Yuha back then compared to the one that first appears at the very start of the war, so you have that. And then Unohana has, this depends on translation, but it does state that she knows like 8,000 different sword styles, so even if he was to have like a sword fight with some of these characters, he would be insanely dangerous. I mean, for the Naruto fans that don't know, the point of the Kenpachi title is that you're like the strongest swordsman in the entirety of the Bleach sort of realm as a Shinigami, and they're like these 2,000 to 3,000 year death gods that fight endlessly. The backstory of Unohana and Kenpachi is specifically that. They just do nothing but brawl and fight randoms and see who's the best on some like Musashi type shit. But I guess all in all, it is super cut and dry what we've said thus far. I think they just genuinely just get BFR'd by his existence, and their only chance is that they fight a weaker version of him that allows himself to be damaged out of excitement and then dies, because he almost did die against Noyatori. He actually says he's going to bleed out. But the later Kenpachis are definitely going to be so strong passively that even trying to pierce his skin is going to be insane, and they established that quite well in the early Soul Society arc when Ichigo tried to cut him. He just tanked it. It got to a stage where he just let him slash him and have a free hit. So, yeah, imagine how much worse that would be with Bankai or just Shikai Kenpachi that appears later.
Yep, that being said, Kenpachi's probably more of a Six Paths character or a Ten Tails character if you want a good matchup. Obviously, he's too much for a mid-tier in Naruto Shippuden. So, that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe to Clyde. And if you guys have any questions or things you want like this answered, you can always pop by my stream. We can discuss it, or, leave a comment down below, some ideas or things you'd like to see talked about. And other than that,
also, guys, do a test on this video. Like, if you're someone that really enjoyed this, just play the video on loop, watch it a few different times, and see how that impacts the video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. Thank you very much for having me on once again. We've got more collabs coming. I don't know when this one's going to drop, but we've been working on a lot of videos. So thank you all. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. Peace, everyone. God bless.